One of the reasons that I've seen back and forth is, oh, well, someone said we shouldn't use the forms, or we should keep using these forms, and this, that, and the other. And the reality of it is that environment is the reason the forms were created, because no one is definitively saying, we're going to change these forms, we're going to do this. So I'm adopting the eXp forms as a team leader, and I'm going to show you those today. Whether you decide to use them or not, it's your decision. I'm not going to talk about the differences between the two forms in depth. And I'm definitely not here to argue why one form is one way or the other, but I will show you the things that I've seen, and I'm not an attorney, that I feel like make our forms a little bit, A, more consumer friendly, but also B, that will make our relationships with our clients a little bit clearer. And I think that's the spirit of where we're going. If you were on Empower Conference last week, Tammy Pack shared a slide, and it has stuck with me all week. And my team already saw it because I shared it. A lot of us are trying to be paid like professional athletes, but we have the work ethic of a church league softball player. That resonated with me, because what I did is, when this all started, my first initial like fight or flight was I started complaining. I started complaining about the calls that were being made. I started complaining about the changes that I was going to have to go through. And when Tammy showed this, which it wasn't even related to the settlement, I was like, every agent needs to see that correlation right now. Because a lot of us have, for the last few years, particularly on the buy side of transactions, been paid like professional baseball players, and we've been able to skirt through with the work ethic of a church softball player. And I'm here to raise my hand and say, I've had some of those deals. Okay, friends? So I'm not saying y'all don't work hard. I'm saying that with the model that we've come from, there was a lot of ways, again, Joe mentioned it earlier, that we weren't tying ourselves to this hard list of items that we were providing our buyers, because if we could show up to the door and that 2.4 or whatever the amount was posted in the MLS, we knew a paycheck was on the way. So let's jump in. I'm going to start by showing you our new seller loop. How many people in here are in dot loop or a system similar? Great. You're going to see our dot loop backend. I'm not going through every single document. There's some things our teams are doing that we're working through that I'm not going to share today, but I do want to show you where the eXp docs are showing up and how we're using them. First and foremost, we have the new eXp exclusive right to sell. Can anyone in the room tell me the phrase that Leo has shared with us multiple times that tell us that we can share that the seller is willing to potentially offer concessions to the buyers? Anybody know that phrase off the top of their head? Seller? Oh, go. No. Nope. The sentence is, sellers are willing to negotiate any terms put into the purchase contract. That's the sentence. So we have two listing agreements. Why are you looking at me like I'm so crazy?
Keep going. There's no sound.
Oh. I don't know how to fix that.
Actually, there's no
Sellers are
sound.
willing to negotiate.
Any term negotiated into the purchase contract. Leo has said it 3 or 4 times. Our team has it pinned into one of our canvas. That is the sentence that he said that we can put. So let me show you what we did to make it easy for us to know. If we have a seller that we're taking an exclusive right to sell to, and they are absolutely open to offering those buyer agent commissions or concessions, we went ahead and drafted a with concessions eXp exclusive right to sell, and we'll walk through it. But the main difference between the two, why you see 2 in our agreement, is so that our agents didn't have to remember the phrase every single time. We wrote it in here. Sellers are willing to entertain any request put into the purchase contract. Easy enough? Already in there. But let's go through this document while we're looking at it. And I'll talk about some of the things that we've already run into that we had to clarify or fix. Because again, this wasn't built for North Carolina realtors. This was built for 50 state realtors. Fair? Pretty easy, the property address. We've been encouraging our agents to not be lazy, not be church softball players, and put as many of those lot, block, sections, legal descriptions in as possible, even though it doesn't separate it out by blanks. You have your length of agreement. No changes there, yes. And then an agency disclosure, right? The agency relationship between the seller and broker determines how broker will work on seller's behalf. And then the listing price. Easy so far, yes? Address, term of the contract, the length, and the listing price. Here's where I believe that if you are a North Carolina broker and you are working under eXp, why this document is better. And I'm going to tell you for a second why I opted to use this form over our existing 101. Because here we have no conversation whatsoever about that co-buyer broke. Does that make sense? What have we been told? Someone raise their hand. What have you been told if you're using the 101 that you need to do? Put a 0 in there. Okay, so let's just, I don't work in an office all day where I don't have to interact with the general public, right? I'm a broker. I go on a listing appointment and I show up, and Teresa, you're right after me because they're only going to look at the best. We've got a couple more brokers that are interviewing for that job, and maybe we have a broker that's outside of eXp that's also going to interview for that job. That seller could potentially be looking at people filling out that buyer broke 3 different ways. I believe in the spirit of the settlement, much like Joe said about that 220. I feel very strongly that it's not up to me to pre-negotiate a commission for a buyer's agent. I want to be very clear. I want you to please go sell my listings. And I want to make sure that we get a deal that behooves both of our parties. But it is not my job anymore to go and pre-negotiate that amount. And I don't want to go to a listing appointment, and I don't want to, number one, be taken out of context for putting a 0 there, because if the next agent comes in and that seller didn't listen to everything I had to say, and they say, well, the last agent that was in here, they put 2.4 and you put 0. So when we go to negotiate, because I got the listing, when we go to negotiate Joe's buyer agent and he's presenting now a concession, well, that seller could go back and say, but you said we would be offering 0. No, I told you it would all be negotiable. So I just like that it's not there. And if we're going to be competing at the listing table with other agents outside of our office, I don't want to be at a disadvantage because my form doesn't look comparable. Even though they could pull them out and compare them apples to apples because it's the same form. So that is one reason why we decided we were going with the exclusive right to sell. I still have a question about why we have a percentage, an exact amount of percentage in other. If any of you guys ever stumble upon a case where you have other in your listing agreement, like you're taking like cows or something in exchange for listing, please just let me know what they are. We are not planning to use other, so I actually didn't even put a fillable box there because I don't know what you would put there, okay? Make sense? Another reason why I really like this document. We had an agent this week who's been working with a friend of hers for months to get ready to get mom's house on the market. They didn't want to go through an office exclusive process. They wanted to get mom out, but lo and behold, in the middle of the process, what has happened? Someone has a friend who wants to buy the house. How many of you have had to breach that conversation?
Yep.
So then we're like, well, we're going to fill out this listing agreement. We're going to put this stuff, but don't worry, I'll kind of put this guy in a pocket and I'll vet him. And then you can't get any documents signed because they're so worried about that unqualified friend that wants to buy the house. So Kathleen was able to use this just yesterday and go and say, look, let's get my paperwork buttoned up, right? There's 2 ways that this could go. That friend could have an agent already in the works that they want to work with. And if they come to us, we will cooperate with them. We can talk about what concessions you're willing to offer and go from there. But there's another alternative. If that person's not intending to use any broker representation, I can go ahead and I'm going to pre-negotiate with you, Mr. Seller, what we're going to charge to go ahead and handle the paperwork and provide fairness to that buyer. Go back to real estate school for a second. Remember the old car? You don't owe these people old car, okay? You're not old carring these unrepresented buyers. You're providing fairness and competency to get their forms filled out as a fiduciary to your seller. Now, let me show you one thing that we did to our listing agreement while I'm on the topic of unrepresented buyers. For those of you that have to build processes and systems out of this, in our listing folder, you'll notice we already have an unrepresented buyer disclosure and paperwork already in the listing side. Does that make sense? Because that's the proper place where that would go. If you're in a system like this, you're not going to be creating a new loop for an unrepresented buyer. You're going to attach them to this one. And if you're in .loop, you can add a role as an unrepresented buyer. We've been doing this actually we had an unrepresented buyer. It's like someone new and they kept giving us all the tests. We had an adamant unrepresented buyer on one of our listings. First one I've had in a long time. And they were just adamant that they were not going to work with an agent. No worries. Send us an offer. We'll take care of it. They couldn't produce an offer. They literally couldn't draft up a contract that we could advise our sellers to sign because they were taking contracts from 3 years ago and crossing stuff out they didn't think was applicable. And I just said, I'm so sorry, we can't advise our sellers to sign this. And they were at the US Open and they had been drinking and they paid our agent $1,000 to write their contract. All right. So think about that. The unrepresented buyer that shows up to your listing, you can go ahead and have that pre-negotiated. And that's another reason why I think that this is stronger than our current 101. Oh man, now I have to get back to where I was. It's so scary. All right. Oh, they don't let me do this all the time. Okay. Go back to the listing agreement.
And I have a question.
Yes?
Are you going to stick by that $1,000?
No. It's negotiable on. No. I mean, a lot of our agents have been looking at what would customary compensation look like at that price point and adjusting. It's just like everything else in here. You can change it as you go. Make sense? All right. Buyer list is not different. One thing, if you're using this form and you're confused, I did confirm this. It's kind of silly. They want you to write out in the words the amount of time that you're protected, right, with your list of potential buyers, and then put the actual numerical number right after. Does that make sense? So those of you that protect your listing for 90 days after a cancellation, write out 90, put 90, 90 in the blank. A little silly. Okay. Again, I'm not going to read through all of this. I don't think that makes sense. But just like we've done before, if you're using eXp exclusives, you don't have to use the office exclusive checkbox of the 101 because eXp exclusives is already into this agreement. And so just as we've been doing before, we have 2 listing agreements, an office exclusive, and then a public market. But instead of it being just office exclusive, and then we have to explain what it is, I already literally have the website in there that they can go and take a look at. I thought that was strong. On the MLS, through the placement of her sale sign, through photos and videos, virtual tours on the property, other places. Now, here's one thing that I think as North Carolina brokers, we just need to be a little careful of. How many of you at the listing table ask the seller, can I disclose that there are other offers? I've literally never asked that question at the listing table. I've asked it in the process, but never at the listing table. So we don't have escalation clauses in North Carolina. Please raise your hand and agree with me.
Yes.
It's very surprising because there's a lot of people that think that we do, but we don't. Obviously, that is more standard in other states. As I mentioned from the beginning, this is tough because this is a 50-state document, not a 1-state document. If you read this, it says the broker is authorized to disclose the existence of offers. That'd be fine. But they put a little parentheses and it says, including sales price and or terms and conditions of sale to third parties. Tell me right now, do you think you can check that box?
No.
Okay, great. How about this? Can the seller tell you to disclose that there are offers? Yes. Correct. So here's what we are doing. And when I'm told that I can't, I will go into the access group and I will say I was wrong. But this is what we are doing. We are checking broker is authorized. But then in this beautiful box of additional terms, we put the verbiage in here. Per North Carolina Real Estate Commission guidelines, no terms of any contract may be disclosed to third party, but the presence of other offers can be disclosed. Y'all good? It just says that per North Carolina Real Estate Commission guidelines, no terms of any contract may be disclosed to third parties, but the presence of other offers can be disclosed. So you're gonna have to ask your seller, can I disclose that there are other offers or may I not? If they say you may not, it's easy. You check cannot on the box above. If they say, I want you to tell people that we have multiple offers if we do, which I hate having to have that conversation at the listing table right now, shoot me. But we can check is. Make sense?
Yes.
Great. Authorizes the lockbox. This all looks very similar. The broker services that is a page and a half on the 101 is condensed down into a paragraph. Seller commitment, what the seller is required to do is put down to it. And then fixtures included and excluded items. This is not an eXp thing. This is just helping you understand. You could literally put on there anything you want, but what really matters?
Fridge.
What? Where does it really matter that exclusions and exclusions are listed? Purchase a contract, yeah. My seller today could be like, they can have everything they want, and then they could literally at the time of offer, when that offer is 25,000 under, be like, they ain't getting nothing. So use this as a way to, you know, take down what they've said, to show to them that you understand, but where are you actually responsible for checking on these things? Always. And now you get to do that while also trying to remember what the buyer agent wanted in concessions, and also how much of that was for commission, and then also when did they send you the 220 form. So take notes. What? You're wondering.
I love that it's 4 pages and not 13.
Woo, my TC loves that it's 4 pages and not 13. A conversation about recording at the property. Don't be a weirdo. Again, some of you, I don't know how you feel about this. My team, and I stole this straight from John Glutch. We have a 72-hour termination agreement. If you want to cancel with us in 72 hours, we will do that for you. Number one, I don't want to work with you if you don't want to work with me, but also it gives me a set amount of time to go potentially fix whatever's wrong, or let that couple settle down because they're probably just mad. So this is in the contract, this agreement may be canceled prior to the end of the term upon mutual written agreement between seller and broker. If you don't like that, guys, you've always been able to put into the agreement what your terms are. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, so you've got governing law, fair housing, your Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act conversation. I went through and I mapped the 101 to this, and other than the bulk of the agreement that has you fill in all of the information about oil tanks and liens and all of those things, pretty much I could map almost every paragraph by paragraph to where we were. No assignment. And then it's just signatures. Also, if you have 4 sellers, which we have, it seems like more often than not, in these estates, we can get everybody's signatures on there because we have up to 4 sellers on the page, which kills the additional signatures, which is great. What questions do you have about this form?
So eXp is cool with you manipulating the form that they've already provided?
Hmm?
I'll take it.
That's
From Leo's mouth, I can put, sellers are willing to negotiate anything that comes into the purchase contract.
But you manipulated a few other things on this contract as well, and sort of tweaked it a little bit, right? On this listing agreement?
The only thing I tweaked was that I said that I informed that I cannot, per North Carolina Real Estate Commission, give out the terms of an offer that comes in.
But you didn't change the form, you just filled in blanks.
Yes, I just added it to the additional provisions, the additional terms and conditions.
You can't change the verbiage, but you can add your own.
Correct.
Blanks that are provided.
Correct.
Are you gonna share it?
Share the document?
Your changes slide.
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely, yeah.
so.
Yes.
My question is, between this document and our standard,
Mm-hmm.
do you see anything that our standard has that protects us that is not protected in this
You know,
document that
I'm gonna be
see?
honest with you.
Yeah.
J.Y. Monk gave me my certificate to sell real estate, not a law school. So I'm not gonna answer that
I'm
question.
with you, girl. I'm with you.
I don't know, but here's the reality of it. Let's put it into practice, right? A seller royally screws me the fudge over. I'm busy. I've got 200 transactions I'm gonna close this year. I'm not a highly litigious, and this is where I'm making a decision for my group that you don't have to make for yours. But I'm just giving you the option. I'm not going and suing someone's pants off because they went around me, and so I'm just not going to. I'm not going to. Personally, Anna Powell's not going to.
Gotcha.
I will tell you from personal experience, which is just a good thing to know, that eXp will have your back 100% if
Yes.
you decide to take that route, as long as you have done your due diligence, you have documentation of everything that's not related to a form, but has to do with the transaction, such as things that the other person said, things you told them and gave them a heads up on, and you have your documents, your ducks in a row. eXp will back you 100%. I've had to send an enforcement letter to a client and remind them of our terms, and they quickly realized that they would just hang out for another 6 months. So I would encourage you to just always do the right thing, always have your documentation, and know that you work for a great company that will back you. So just kind of know that it has happened, and I've seen firsthand. So
I also feel like we're living in a world where people are going to do what they want to do and go lawyer up after the fact anyways. I've watched it happen in some of our own transactions in the last 6 months. So, I mean, again, I might just be kind of jaded on the topic, but I also feel like kind of what Joe's saying is like the things that are gonna get sticky are gonna probably be things more transactional within the transaction. What have you shared? What have you done? You know, again, the eXp attorneys drafted this. It wasn't like some random person was like, here, let's just throw a document together. So I have to trust. I can't just like I trusted the 101 for my entire real estate career that it covered me. I'm gonna trust that this document's gonna cover our business.
Well, I feel like with the new 6-page RPD, that covers a lot of the things that are in the other 9
Correct.
pages, the underground tanks,
Correct.
all this other stuff, that's kind of covered on the 6-page RPD.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, some things that aren't here that I think are good for sellers to sign, a wire fraud warning.
Right.
Guys, make a disclosure. Go to an attorney, say, I want to draft a disclosure that I can send out to my sellers along with their agreement that just covers me on a couple of topics. Wire fraud might be one of those things because they're not here. There's nothing in here that the 101 has about making sure that you're treating everyone fairly. There's nothing in here about the buyer letter, which I think I don't know, maybe y'all's listings are getting them, ours are not. So, you know, like there's things in there that don't match, but as far as what I believe to be those core kind of essential items, I feel like this one covers us pretty well. Again, you don't want to use it, that is so fine. It's all good. I'm not going to ever see your 101. But I have been confirmed that if this goes into Sky Slope, our people will get paid. And I think everyone has been waiting for that answer, and I have it from Kendall Bonner. So I feel like that counts. Because I was worried too. I was like, what if I spend all this time building these templates and these loops and then North Carolina says you can't use them, right? That was my greatest fear. All right, any questions on that one? Okay, good. If you pulled well, let's just dive into this. How many of you imagine that as a good listing agent who's been in this class today, and you know that compensation's gone in a couple of your platforms and the rest of us will be gone on the 6th, how many of you are expecting that buyer's agent is going to produce the correct form to you if they want compensation covered?
No.
Anyone have faith that buyer's agent is going to know what form you need to receive from them to potentially sign? Neither. So if you're setting up systems and processes to make your agent's lives easier, I would encourage you to get both a 220 and a confirmation of compensation. Now, eXp made a small change to their confirmation. Raise your hand if you've looked at these. Okay, so we've got some people that have looked. So if you looked at the confirmation of compensation from, it's a seller, let me pull it up. Let me not use words that are not right. Sorry, wrong one. That's because this is an old loop. See, told you they've already changed one document, which is gonna happen, guys. And you can't get butthurt that you were in the office till 12 o'clock putting them in. eXp released a new, let's find it. July 31st, okay. So, I don't know if I can show the other one. I think I moved away from it. Before, this form had in parentheses right underneath it, for eXp agents as buyer broker form. Does everyone remember that? That was what was on the form up until yesterday.
Yep.
Yes, it's our equivalent of the 220.
Correct.
It's the USA 072924. There was like a 1724 version of this document. And this document was what, as an eXp agent, you should be using if you don't want to use the 220. And I'm going to tell you why I think you should use this form, even though I told you I wasn't going to tell you why I think you should use this form. But this is our version of the 220. Everyone tracking? If you're a South Carolina agent, because I looked this up because we have some, it's your 120. This is your 120, 220 form. It used to say for eXp agent as buyer broker, and they took that out, and I believe they took it out so that we could share across brokerages easier, like they're doing with all their other documents. That's what I think. I don't know. But it has the property address, the compensation agreement. Notice it does not have other on this one, which is good. And then a length of agreement. I'm gonna pull the 220 up at the same time because I literally want us to go back and forth. And Barb, and I'm so sorry, this is taking longer than I thought it was going to. I thought it was going to be really fast. Oh, pull you up. The new 220.
Oh, you're talking money, Anna. They'll be fine. Everybody's fine.
220. This is the North Carolina 220 form, cooperating compensation agreement. Off the bat, I don't love. And this is the direct compensation from seller. Do you already see how the language is different? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what happens. Eric, you're over there at Keller Williams and you're happy as a clam. And you are showing one of my properties and you send me my seller's name, your buyer's name, 123 Main Street, and you're gonna send this to me saying the listing firm agrees to pay selling firm because nothing has changed. We just can't put it in the MLS, right? So I have the pot of gold that Eric wants.
Yes.
He doesn't have to ask my seller, I already have it. Anna has it. So he's asking the listing firm to pay him his cooperating compensation, and here they have other, so again, figure out how to use it, but a percentage, a flat fee, or other. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Our form doesn't give that option. Property address, compensation agreement is between the seller and the buyer's broker. I could spend 3 hours talking about why this is way better than taking concessions from your buyer and applying it, but I don't have that platform today.
But do we have to be concerned about other brokerages accepting that, even
Yes,
though the language is better?
So I have already done this week, and I had a RE/MAX circle of excellent agents say, I'm just trying to protect you. You shouldn't use that form. Here's what eXp has said.
Because
That's
that's
what she
exactly
was
how
in
she
my
talks.
brain.
Look.
Her name was like Martha. I don't know. That's just how she talks. Okay, here's the thing, and I want to be crystal clear on this. I am never going to go back to Martha and convince her to amend her listing agreement down to 2.5%. Have Martha send me the 2.5% co-broke directly. It's not going to happen. Here's what eXp has said.
Yep.
When they send you that sweet message back and say, I'm trying to protect you, you sweet little lady, you're an idiot. You say, that's great, Martha. I'm just going to confirm in writing that your seller understands that they are paying my commission. And she's going to say, well, I'm paying it. And you're going to say one more time, I know, but ultimately it came from them. And you're going to screenshot that email, make sure it goes into your SkySlope file, and eXp will still pay you. They are not asking you guys to rewrite every agent's brain in the world. Until I heard that last week, I thought that was the task we were at, and that's why I cracked out for 7 days. I was like, I don't know that I can convince myself I need to do this, let alone the 10 million agents in our marketplace. So again, they may not take this form, but what is your best practice? It's to try to start. I think it's to try to start with this one.
Yep.
You raising your hand? I'm looking at you because you're a forms expert. Okay. Again, additional terms in here. I don't know what I haven't gone through anything where that's worked, but one thing I will also point out is the length of this agreement. And I don't have all the answers. I'm being very transparent. Y'all could pick me apart in 2 seconds if you started asking some really good questions here. But the length of agreement, I believe, is more protective to us as agents on this form, because the agreement shall begin on the date last signed by seller and buyer's broker and will automatically end on, and then it's blank, or upon the completion or termination of any then pending transaction between seller and buyer concerning the property, whichever is later. Let me show you the 220 form, and then Jessica here. I might pick on you to tell us what you think you were saying about best practice here. Term here is the agreement shall be effective when signed by seller or listing firm as applicable and selling firm. This agreement will terminate upon the earlier of closing as defined in the contract, or blank, unless the fee has been earned prior to such date. I think that unless the fee has been earned prior to such date gives you protection, but again, JY Monk, right? Not NYU. So Jessica, your interpretation here was that if we're using this form, we are to leave it blank until a contract is, what was that?
Until a contract has a
settlement date and then doing 7 days after that settlement date to account for that. But you can't put you can put an expiration date in sooner. However, then you run into, okay, that it expires sooner than we need to. That's if you opt to use Form 220. Ideally, you're not having this signed by the seller and pushed out with a never-ending date also. Like, we don't do this forever and ever, amen. Please. Seller.
But I have, sorry, Anna.
I don't know if I have the answer, but go ahead.
I have a different thought.
Yeah.
But you know I love you, so. I have a different thought because of just my place of curiosity. We got one this morning and I paused when I looked at it. She had put September 30th or something like that. I actually see a different approach, maybe on the, you're talking about the expiration date, right?
Yes, of this form.
On the expiration date, I see that as an opportunity to put in there an extremely short date, meaning if.
Were you the listing agent receiving one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got a hot listing coming to the market on Thursday, which is what happened. We know this one, and already Thursday's booked, Friday's booked, Saturday's booked, and we're gonna go way over on list price. When they start booking it and somebody sends me that, which they did, they sent it to Mary, and it was, hey, I'm gonna be showing your house and my firm requires I get this signed prior. She put September 30th. I told Mary to redline that and kick it back with Monday.
Yeah.
Because here's why. It forces their hand.
Yes.
Either shit or get off the pot. And
Yes.
it's like you either make a decision with what you're sending me, or this may be lower on Monday or Tuesday.
Correct.
But we anticipate this property to go to the to go under, and your negotiations are gonna have to be in line with our timeline. So that, I didn't wanna disagree
On the
with, that's
list,
not.
No, because it's two different perspectives. I've told my team from the listing side, you better keep this as short as possible because I don't want to have a seller tied down to this for 30 days. And yes, this one has the buyer block in there, so I would assume they can't just go pull another buyer and assume that it's applicable, but it's the same thing. You might have, and again, like we represent buyers
Sorry if
too.
I misspoke.
No, it's not, but it's the concept of like, well, then what stops a buyer broker from running around town, getting 4 or 5 of these signs, showing 4 or 5 properties, and then we're gonna sit down with our buyer and say, okay, now you can pick what you like because I have this, that, and that signed. And if you've got these days forever and ever and ever, are we doing the job of a fiduciary to our seller? Have we really given them the ability to negotiate? Obviously, they cannot sign the offer, and that's fine.
It doesn't matter, because it can be changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? When the offer comes in, it's gonna change anyway. So you can do the pressure tactic if you want, it may or may not work.
Mhm.
You can put the expiration date of the listing agreement, because that's how long you're gonna be with your seller, and it doesn't matter, because the seller can change their mind anyway. So getting hung up on
The details.
semantics of it, I like what you said earlier, don't even submit it until you're ready to do it.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna, yeah.
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 Yes, that's the better approach. The problem is, will everyone have the same brain as you? No.
They will not.
And I'm gonna, yeah, you see what I'm saying? They won't think through it like that. They
No.
won't think logically about it. They're gonna be so focused because, to their point, their broker said, you better get this signed.
Yep.
And they're gonna be so hyper fixated on getting this same thing signed and in compliance so that they can get paid. They've not even thought about, well, I have a whole offer I need to negotiate.
The other piece too, Anna, with this is agents are gonna be some agents are gonna be so focused on Form 220 is how I get paid. No, how you get paid is in your buyer agency agreement. This is just how much you're asking from the other
Correct.
side. A lot of agents, they're really confused. This form does not tell you how you're gonna get paid.
Correct.
Your agents, this just confirms how much the seller is willing to pay.
Correct.
But there's gonna be a lot of educational needs.
Correct, because we are trying to make new things fit into a world that we were doing different things on. And we haven't most of us have not gotten to the new world yet. We did comply, our team went fully compliant like last week. So I've already seen the objections, and that was one reason why I was glad I could take the forms over just to show you some of the simplifications we made. My suggestion, we're going to try to get this patched through. When Nancy or Betty Jean says I can't use it, that's fine. We'll go to the 220, but guys, you better make sure that this is checked. If for some reason they will not accept it and they keep telling you the listing firm has to do it, until I hear otherwise, it's an email showing that your position is that the seller is paying you directly, and put it into SkySlope, and eXp is not in the business of you guys not getting paid because other agents aren't playing ball.
Was eXp saying that they cannot say the listing firm?
Correct.
For the buyer's agent? No, I know that it can't say listing firm for us.
Not as a buyer's agent either.
But if I'm working with Keller Williams and they're like, no, we're paying you, the listing firm, not the seller, then what?
You have to get an email showing where you tried to share with them that they need to understand that their seller understands that you are inevitably being paid by the seller, and then put that in. No, by the
I'm
seller.
saying it the other way. I'm saying Keller Williams agent has it in their agreement that they're taking 5%.
Correct,
Okay, and so they're splitting it with us.
correct,
And so they want us to put listing firm,
correct.
listing firm. So I checked listing firm, eXp is gonna kick it back to me?
Nope.
eXp wants.
No, if you can show the substantial email contact where you tried to remedy and the other agent just refused to, then absolutely you uploaded. eXp said they are not in the business of us not getting paid because of non-compliance by other agencies. Because it's not a Keller Williams rule, right?
Right.
Keller Williams, as of today, we'll see, says that they'll share buyer broke. That was our issue. eXp is not expecting you guys to go back to every pending contract you have, every listing you show, and try to convince that agent to reformulate their listing agreement to take it out of their big lump sum. But they are asking that we do our due diligence to share with that agent to be sure that their seller understands that, yes, while they negotiated that with their Keller Williams agent, that in reality, that percentage that we've negotiated is coming from the seller.
Yeah, and Anna, just to,
Yeah.
if you could tell them why eXp wants to do it that way, because that's more of compliance with DOJ, keeping us cleaner than everyone else. If you can just share that, because
Yeah.
I think a lot of people were like, well, why, that sounds stupid, but it actually is the smartest thing to keep us compliant. So when those lawsuits come again, which we know they will, in about 6 months when all this settles in, we can then show as a firm that we made the attempt,
Yes.
but the other folks, because remember, it wasn't just NAR that got sued, it was eXp, Keller Williams, Coldwell, but it was individual companies too. So when this comes back again, eXp will be protected for one, and you'll be protected, so.
I think a lot of us are in a tough spot because I do feel like the narrative through the summer was not much is changing. You just can't advertise the MLS. That's why I was on, have been on meetings, and it seems like people's focus is more on the workaround of how do I get my compensation advertised versus how do I truly comply with what this is trying to say? And what this is trying to say is, as listing agents, it's not your job to pre-negotiate an amount for the buyer's agent. As buyer's agents, and I can't get into all the legals because everyone's gonna start talking about cooperation or compensation being contingent on offers. Go read, educate yourself before we start that narrative. But 100%, our team is taking the approach that we are not predetermining amounts, that it will be negotiated with every offer between buyer's broker, seller, and that we will advise our sellers on what we think looks like they would be a good deal for them. No changes in our fiduciary duties, and net sheeting everything that comes in.
I don't know if anybody else has had this problem, but I didn't even hear it through eXp initially, but I had every agent calling me from Keller Williams and everybody else, what, eXp's not paying out buyer's commission?
Yeah, it's the cheap headline.
So it's like, I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, and then when I learned, I went back to him, I said, no, that has nothing to do with it. We're just trying to go in advance of everything and have it go between the buyer and the seller.
Yes.
I've been in real estate a very, very long time. I've been a broker in charge a very, very long time. And when they first made this statement, literally the people who were in the room with me saw my face. And they were like, okay, Diane, what's wrong? And I'm like, oh my God. Actually, I said, what the? And I don't swear a lot out loud, so you know. And then I thought about it. It took me 1 minute. And I went, this is brilliant. Think about it, people.
I agree.
We are only negotiating with the seller. We're not gonna get sued. Nobody's gonna say we're pre-doing something. Nobody's gonna say that, we're colluding. We only care about what the seller wants to do, and it doesn't matter what side of the transaction you are on. If you're on the buyer side, you're negotiating with the seller. If you're on the seller side, you're only negotiating your compensation. And personally, I would rather be sitting at a table and say, you have to pay me X percent. Now, know that, buyers are gonna come and they're gonna wanna get paid and all that conversation. But let me tell you, I think that listing agreement is gonna be so much easier to sign.
Yep.
And I had my first buyer last night that I had to sign buyer agency with, and I went over the spiel, and no problem, absolutely no problem. You just say, look, I am worth this, pay me. You pay everybody else in your life, pay me.
Pay me. Yes.
Can you go over the process again, because what, we have, tell us what we have to do and copy it and send it, put it in SkySoul. So the important thing is the seller box has to be checked.
It does, but there are going to be listing agents, if you have a buyer currently, that are not going to correct that checkbox for you. They're going to say, no, Shug, this is how it is. So you just need to show that you've provided documentation, that you are educating that agent, that the seller understands that they are ultimately the one paying it. Does that make sense? eXp, I thought, did one of the few great things from the broker call was they made this abundantly clear. eXp is not in the business of getting on this high horse so hard that we have contracts and we have a shift period and you're not gonna get paid. Because I've had that question. Because I've had to amend too in the last week and it did not go well. All right, I don't know if I finished that document. I think I did. Any questions on that, on our compensation form?
In the chat, we have a question. They're asking if it's in SkySlope?
Yes, these forms are all in SkySlope. Yep. And this one has been updated, so you won't even have to go back and change the wrong one.
Hey, and I was just gonna say, I was talking to Managing Vic last night at our event, and there is conversation that has been partnered with attorneys and the state around clarifying dual agency and where that lives. Because right now, as we know, they're telling us not to put anything in those blank lines under dual agency in the listing agreement if you're using the state one. But then it's like, well, where does it go?
But in the buyer agreement.
Right, but
right.
As I say, you turn to the buyer's agreement and then you communicate that back to the seller if you end up getting into a dual agency situation.
Right.
So they just shared that with us last night. So just
perfect. Every day, learning something new. Let me show you guys the buyer agency agreement. I feel like that's the other place to spend some time. And then I think that will have covered most of the things. There's an unrepresented in the single property, but I feel like people are already kind of in that. Again, we went and mapped this through from our buyer broker compensation, our buyer broker agreement through NCAR. This one's even shorter.
So you're using this one, right? Your team?
Yep, we're using this one.
Okay.
We're using this one. It, again, gives you a general area, gives you a point where you have to have a termination to your agreement. You have to have an end date. What I really love about this, especially if you're using it in your consultation, is the verbiage for best experience. Buyers encouraged to be accompanied by broker or by broker on buyer's first visit to the property and to conduct all negotiations for the property in good faith and exclusively through the broker. I wish our North Carolina form said that so clearly, right? Buyer understands that signing more than one buyer broker representation agreement for any overlapping period of time could expose buyer to liability for paying additional fees. That was a change in our state thing, so that same verbiage exists. Buyer is not party to any active exclusive buyer broker representation agreements, and buyer is a party to, and you can put however many non-exclusive buyer broker representations. Non-exclusive buyer broker representation does exist. Most firms just don't accept it, and you can't have it at time of offer. And then here's where your broker fee goes. Buyer agrees to pay broker as provided below. Again, a lot of legal conversation. The buyer broker fee is not set by law, and that's how bad I am with these forms. I already think these are lawyered up, right? You go from one to this one. I'm like, this one's still long. It gives you your protection period right here, right? So if you protect for 30 days or 60 days, 90 days, whatever you decide after your expiration, you're protected. And then again, you have a percentage or exactly. And this is what I think is so key, is really showing that there are only two ways that can happen. A credit to the buyer at closing, where the buyer then pays you according to these fees. Or that the seller pays the broker compensation directly. If you want to ask me, I like number two better. I think you're going to have a whole lot of people confused about why there's $30,000 on a 2T and they can't have any of it. All right? It doesn't matter how well we explain it. Additional terms, This shows that buyer acknowledges that broker may represent multiple buyers interested in purchasing the same property as buyer. That was in our old agreement. I just didn't know it because it was buried in a lot of stuff. I think that's good. And then obviously the same cancellation thing, right? Which again, you could always go and put in to your additional terms, something that gives you a protection period of X amount of time if you have that there. Buyer 1, buyer 2, and broker signs. Easy?
Easy.
2 pages.
So Anna, your team is fully using eXp forms?
Correct. I mean, our OTP hasn't changed, right? That's not new, but our representation agreements are all eXp.
And what did you call them again? Say the term, our representation what?
Forms.
No,
What did I say?
agreements.
Agreements.
Right,
Is that what I said?
right. No. I'm saying to
Yes.
delineate between
Yes.
the offer to purchase
Yes.
contract
Yes.
versus,
Yes. So that's the buyer broker agreement. I think it's super simple. Obviously eXp, just to give you some exposure, also gave us an unrepresented buyer disclosure. So if you have that, if Mary says she's absolutely not working with you and Joe does not convince her at that coffee date, this is that document that you would provide. It replaces, I don't know what the number is in North Carolina, but it replaces one of those docs. And the only other thing that we have is the 1 day, right? Just your 1 day buyer broke. Everyone's seen that, the single property, not but 1 day. I don't mean to say 1 day. That's what we called it all summer, and now it's a single property. If you weren't on the call, this form needs to be used if you intend to get paid by that buyer. So at an open house, you don't have to have it signed every time. Open houses are not applicable, but our team was thinking, okay, well, let's say we get a sign call on one of our new builds and I send an agent from the team out there. They're working almost like a sub-agent of the seller. Do they have to get this signed? Well, did I send that buyer's agent to try to capture them as a client and get a buyer broker representation on it? Yes.
Yes.
The form needs to be there. Virtual tours, same thing. The body does not need to be there for this need to apply. Everyone hear that?
How are you suggesting your agents have the conversation, like on a sign call from your?
No, not my job today.
Yeah, just a little feel.
Not my job today. Not my job today. Nope. Sticking to the forms.
Yeah.
It looks very similar. We're sending them out ahead of. There are car printers, everyone at Walmart. Adam Noe sent me the link the other day. I think we're just gonna buy everyone a car printer. A car printer, a printer for your car. Because you got to think about that step in between. If you're going to plan to present this for signatures at the door, right? Which I think is in my opinion, the way that we're going to try to do it is preface with it, make sure they're in agreement, but attempt to execute together when we can read some body language and communicate more clearly. So car printers might be how we do that. But very honestly, we've been so focused on getting these forms set up. I don't think I've got my head around everything else.
I have another question. I know it's a little off the form, so I'm gonna ask you about the unrepresented buyers that will be calling.
Uh-huh.
Are you, I guess, on a team, and you have a team too, so it's like, are you gonna show them, you as a listing agent, you're getting the call, are you showing the house? Are you having them have someone else show it? Because
For me personally, no, I typically will send it out for someone else to show it. Particularly in the case that I know that my seller is willing to negotiate all terms negotiated into the purchase contract. Why would I not give someone else an opportunity to go show it and take advantage of those concessions?
So just like at your listing appointment, let's say you get 3-6 for your fee.
Mm-hmm.
Where on these easy forms are you showing like what your seller is willing to compensate, like the other?
I'm not at the listing table because that amount, they are ultimately going to be interested in what is at that net sheet. What are they making? So I'm not setting up. I'm saying that I think that you should offer compensation to a buyer's agent, but I'm not using 2.4. I'm not using 3%. I'm saying that when the time comes, if a broker wants to show this property, in the great phrase that Daria and I were working with the other day is it opens that buyer pool up, then we'll entertain it. Some of the buyer's agents out that are working with buyers are going to have to flip that switch from I can only show this to my buyer if I have this form signed because my buyer doesn't want to pay me commission to my buyer knows that as a buyer broker, I am the highest and best offer they have to give with me attached to the offer. And if the buyer directs you you 100% can make your commission a part of a term that a seller can negotiate. It's right here. Yes.
Sorry, but at the listing table, you're, on your net sheet, you're gonna show them.
Oh, we're showing them three examples on my net sheet. I'm showing them just our fee. I'm just showing them what it looks like. I'm showing them an unrepresented buyer fee somewhere in there. I don't know the order that we're putting them in. I haven't had to do one. And then we're also taking that purchase price, multiplying it by something between 2 and 3, and showing them what that concession looks like. And saying, this is a baseline for you to take a look at what changes. But every single offer that comes in with every 220 form, we will make sure that they have a net sheet before anything is signed and executed.
Makes sense.
I just seen something yesterday on an email, and forgive me because so many of these are coming out, and I just read it real quickly, and I had wanted to go back to it after, but they said something in regards to the seller concession cannot be just the buyer's agent commission or something. It would have to be more than just that.
No.
And
That's not what it said. That's not what it said.
Okay.
What it said is that concession can go towards anything.
Right, but it did not, something said something about it can't just be for
No,
her.
it can
so
be whatever
can
number
be-
you want it to be,
Okay,
or whatever number the seller agrees to.
okay.
Yes?
They don't have any control over what the buyer does with seller concession.
What?
Right.
Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Am I excused?
Yes. Yeah, she's like, leave me
No,
alone.
Jessica
I
Dillon
got
has,
too many
no,
questions.
Jessica Dillon has a question. I was just messing with her. Also, is this anybody's phone? Oh, it's Pearl's.
Okay, so love this. We're like way behind. Love you guys. Can we throw our trash away, go take a break, and then come back very quickly because we still got a lot of stuff to go. I know you guys are like fatigued, but we got our lender